This is a soft hairbrush, and this is a firm nylon brush. They don't just look different, they have very different usages, especially when it comes to painting wet on wet in watercolor. I didn't realize that for the longest time, and today I want to share that with you. It makes the painting so much easier, and it will change yours as well. Hi, this is Eric from Cafe Watercolor. It's autumn time, my favorite season of the year. It's hard not wanting to capture all the beautiful scenery around me with paintings. The color-changing leaves on the trees are the symbol of autumn, and what better ways to paint these than using wet-on-to-wet technique if you are painting with watercolor. I have made some videos about wet-on-wet techniques already, so if you search for wet-on-wet on my channel, you will find them. But this specific tip I'm going to share with you today is the first time I talk about it. Admittedly, I only start to use this technique in my painting on purpose this year. It has to do with using different brushes during different stages of wet on wet. Now, there are countless watercolor brushes out there, so I'm going to use my own brush set as an example, but you can apply the same principle to other similar brushes. This is my signature brush set from Craftable. Since I got them, these are pretty much the only brushes that I use. They are beautifully made, very good quality brushes, and they are all synthetic hair. At the time of this recording, there are around 180 sets left. Once they're gone, and I don't know when they will make new batch. So order yours if you are interested. I will put the link down below. Anyways, so there are 3 stages in wet-on-wet process. When you first lay down a very watery mixture or simply clean water, it is the wet stage. The water on your wash is still flowing freely, and now is the perfect time to add different colors and watch them blend seamlessly. During this stage, I usually use one of the soft hair brushes. For the big area, I will use the mop brush. For a smaller area, I will use my brown hair brush. The mop brushes are similar to the squirrel hair brushes, and the brown hair brush is similar to a Kolinsky hairbrush. These brushes soak up water very well, so when you use those brushes to do wet on wet, you often add a bit more moisture to your washes. Anything you add during this stage will spread out and blend with each other. Don't expect to get a very defined shape. The wash is simply too watery for that. What I usually do is to paint a defined shape, wet on dry, and then add different colors to it to create a very nice color transition within a shape. The second stage is moist. For me, it is usually about 2 to 3 minutes after the initial wash, but it varies depending on your environment, the humidity, the temperature, and the paper that you're using. Anyways, during that stage, you can still see the sheen on your wash, and the bead is still there on the bottom if you paint a little bit tilted, but the wash flow much slower. During this time, it's probably not a good idea to use the big mop brush anymore because you can introduce way too much water at this stage and create cauliflower edges. I usually use my brown hairbrush to add colors and even different values. One thing I usually do is to get the excessive water out of my brush by going over my rag a few times. During this stage, you can start to see some soft shapes forming. It's still quite abstract and can still spread out more than you want, but you start to see things coming into focus, so to speak. Now the third stage is damp. Usually it's around 5 minutes after the initial wash. There's little to no sheen on your wash, but if you feel the wash with the back of your finger lightly, you can still feel the moisture and it's cool to touch. This is a tricky stage because any extra moisture can make the wash dirty and cauliflower edges will happen. And if you notice that it's about to happen, there is a way to fix that. I talk about it in my other video. And this is the stage where our white nylon hairbrushes shine. Since their hair is made of nylon, it doesn't hold much water. It is much easier to mix a thicker mixture and lay that gently on top of your wash. If you just use the tip of your brush, you can get some very delicate soft details. This is great for lost and found edges, distant trees, and so on. I often use these brushes when I want to paint some soft soft dark shapes within a wash, like a dark area of a tree, a soft occluded shadow underneath an object, and so on. This is a very delicate stage, so it requires a delicate touch. Don't scrub very hard unless you want to lift your paint, but that's another topic for another video. So in summary, as time goes by, you start to switch from bigger, softer brushes to smaller, firmer brushes. During this process, you work with watercolor, you listen to it to create a picture together. So the key is to use the right brushes and the right mixture intensity at the right time. It takes practice, but as you paint more, you will get it. But I still mess up from time to time, so it is not that easy. But that's also part of the experience with watercolor, and to me, that's what makes it fun. Okay, so I'm going to paint a simple tree as an example. After that, I will show you the process of this painting to show you how I apply this technique in the context of a full painting. Before we start though, if you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe. Ring the bell icon so you won't miss out any new video I put up. I don't put up new video as often as before because I don't have that much time anymore. But if a lot of you like it and want more, I will try my best to put up more for you. Thank you so much for your support, and let's get started with the demo. Okay, I'm going to paint something very simple as an example to show you how do I use different brushes and different thickness of mixture during different stages of wetness and the whole wet onto wet process. So I'm going to actually do a very quick drawing. So I'm going to draw that big autumn tree on the left there. I took that photo a couple days ago while it is still sunny, and I'm not going to do the red card there, even though I think it looks pretty interesting, pretty nice, but the main focus is just going to be the tree. So I'm just going to block out the quick silhouette of the tree, and this is the tree trunk. I'm going to do a little bit of grouping of the leaves. So we got two groups of leaves right here, and we got one group here and one group here. So just a quick indication of where I want to leave the light and where I want to paint the dark. Okay, so the sun is coming from the left, so this is hopefully going to help me to get a good sense of the lighting. Where should I paint different values? Okay, so I'm going to pick up my number 18 brush. Again, all of my brushes are synthetic, but this mimics the texture of a squirrel hairbrush, so it soaks up a lot of water, which is great for something like a first wash. So I'm going to do a nice wash for the sky, and I will leave some areas unpainted. I'll leave out the tree, and when I get to the tree, I will actually paint the yellow colors. So this big brush helps me to finish the sky wash relatively quickly. A little bit of the textures right here. All right, and then I'm gonna switch to my second largest brush, which is a number 14 mop, and I am going to paint the color of this yellow tree here with Handsome Yellow Deep with a touch of cadmium yellow. So Handsome Yellow Deep, one of my favorite color, which is so vibrant and warm. It's great for a autumn tree like this one. So there we go. And this is just a quick practice, so I'm not going to worry about some of the color mixed with one another. The blue mixed with yellow is going to turn a little bit green, which is fine. I'll just try to use a little bit more paint for this one, for this wash. So here we go. A little bit of sparkle is fine. You get a little bit of sparkling white, that's totally fine. That, and I'm not trying to define the tree and anything just yet. I'll mix this two color together to give me a green, and I'll just continue to paint. So give it some greens on the back here, and I'll use some cobalt turquoise with Hansen yellow deep to get a pretty warm green, a bit more Hansen yellow deep to get a nice green there. There's some trees in the back and stuff. I'm not really bothering with that. Again, this is just an exercise. Some orange here. So this is the kind of like a first wash, even though I use quite a bit of colors already. But yeah, there you go. Okay, so a nice first wash. And just to give me a little bit more time, I'm gonna spray a little bit of water from a distance to keep it moist a little bit longer. Now, at this stage, the wash is still very, very wet. As you can see the reflection. So it's a good time for me to use my number 12 round soft hairbrush. And you can see it by the brown hair. This brush is similar to like a Kolinsky brush, which is a very soft hairbrush that soak up quite a bit of water, which is great if you want to do some nice wet onto wet work. And now just look at the watercolor doing its work. I'm adding some orange to it, get some nice transition tone down here. Now I want to leave some of this light, so don't get ahead and start to paint anything too dark. Okay, and as you can see, they spread out quite a bit to a point that the edges pretty much vanish in this wash here. So in this stage of wet onto wet, the under wash is still quite moist. It's still quite wet actually. It's not even moist. I'll coat that wet. And when you do wet onto wet, you are going to shift the color. You are going to give it a nice interesting gradation, if you would. It will blend the color very softly, very naturally, but you are not going to see a very distinct edges or defined shape. So here I'm adding a little bit more color and stuff. And I think while I'm doing that, I'm going to mix sort of like a wood color for the wood right here. Now I don't have to go very dark just yet. Actually, I'll just mix like a bright wood color and just paint over it. I'll add the dark a bit later. It's very easy to get ahead of yourself and start to try to define things. Okay, right now I'm just going to play with the color. This stage is for adding different colors. Okay, I can add something a little bit darker, as you can see here, but they are still overall very, very soft. Okay, clean my brush a little bit. A bit more orange right here. And at some point you're gonna notice that you are going to run into risk of creating cauliflower edges, and that's the point that you should be stop using this brush. And I can feel that time is drawing near. It's very, very close to that dangerous point that when wet turn into moist and even damp. Okay, so at this point I think I need to stop doing that. So I'm going to time to take this brush away and switch to our nylon hairbrush. This is a number 10 round. The hair is snappy and it's harder. Okay, you can kind of tell it just snap right back. So it's very resilient, very snappy, and it is made of nylon, so it doesn't pick up much water at all. Even if I wash it like that, if I just work it a little bit on the rag and mix the color, you can see that it doesn't pick up a lot of water. So the color that I mix are going to be a lot thicker. Okay, I might not need to increase the paint by a lot, but because the lack of water on the brush hair itself is going to create a much thicker mixture. Okay, and now will be a good time for me to paint some more wet onto wet. Okay, so see the mixture right here, you can tell the difference. This is much thicker and drier. Okay, you can see the streaks coming out when I'm working the mixture compared to that huge pool of paint and water. This is a lot thicker. Okay, a bit of green here actually. And now when I paint, you notice that the shape is still soft shapes, but has a lot more definition. Okay, and also this also helps because the underneath wash is starting to become drier. Okay, you can actually see this part is pretty much dry. I didn't do wet on too wet on this part, so I can actually paint some quick dry brush mark, and you'll see some dry brush mark here, which is helpful. A good painting usually have both soft edges and hard edges. Okay, don't try to make everything soft, otherwise it can look a little bit mushy. So now I'm starting to paint some light away and starting to create more of a form and structure. Okay, so here still quite moist here, so when I paint I'm still going to see some soft edges, but you can definitely tell that it is more defined. Okay, so trying to preserve some of the light here without making it too complicated. Again, this is just an exercise. I don't want to go too far. Okay, there we go. Okay, so mix more colors, a greener color here, and I'm going to start to paint those to get the shape of the tree to come out. So here we go, some of the darker trees back there. Okay, and that brings the silhouette of the tree out even more and make this brighter. And of course over here as well, mix more paint, adding that to the right side of this yellow trees. Still quite moist down there because the water flowed down naturally, right? So you're going to see a lot more moisture down here, which is great. I have more time to work on the bottom of the tree, which is something that I want to do anyways. Okay, so I like this hard edges, so I will be keeping that. I'll add a few greens here so they're not all really warm, but honestly this is at a very good shape. A few more darks here, and you can actually kind of see that this is starting to dry. So when I do this, you can still feel some soft edges. You can still see some soft edges, but some of the area, especially the light part, they are starting to dry. Okay, so I am going to mix a dark mixture. Blue, burnt umber, touch of red actually, a touch of red, and just going to paint the huge branch right here. Okay, there's one here and one here, and notice this part still a little bit moist, so the branch looks a little bit soft, which is actually nice. I want it to feel kind of lost and found as the branch goes into the leaves. Okay, so just that. It's a very simple one. And now I am going to just continue to use this, or I can switch to a smaller brush and pick up this thicker mixture and start to paint some smaller branches and details. So using the tip of the brush, and I'm just gonna drop the paint in like that. Okay. And now you can have some thicker, darker mixtures within this middle value that I just painted with a bigger nylon brush. Okay, and just giving it a little by a little. Okay, again, the key is not to go overboard. You know, think twice before you put some marks down. Okay, and yeah, some of the area is dry enough for me to actually paint some tree branches. So like over here, over here. Okay, maybe a little bit hints over here. Okay, there we go. And you know, a few marks, and I like how soft overall is, so I'm not going to do too much dry brushing. A few ones like that. Okay, and now, like, I love how lost and soft these edges are, but I can add a few darks here. So some cobalt turquoise, burnt umber, nice and dark, and then hit a few areas that I really want the contrast to pop. So over here, and look at that beautiful soft shape right there, right? That's a little bit risky when you're doing that, but again, if you're using a small nylon brush, it will be easier, and it will help you to mix a thicker mixture. Okay, and over here as well, bit of a darker mixtures down here. And that just brings out this group of bright leaves. Okay, get a little bit of water so the paint flows easier. And I'm going to mix a dark sort of wood color. A bit too warm here. I'm going to add a little bit of blue, and there we go. Yeah, cooler still. And just paint the tree trunk in the back. Look at those nice soft tree trunk, and that also helps to establish some depth. There we go. And you know, nice and soft, which is nice. I actually like those. And if it's thick enough, you can actually scratch it a little bit. Okay. Scratch it a little bit, create a little bit of light from the thicker mixture, like over here as well. I can just do a few ones, you know, areas that you think is much thicker. You can actually scratch some of the, you use a fingernail or a palette knife. Okay, so we're almost done with this quick painting. Okay, I'm just going to, still a little bit moist, but I think I should be able to paint a bit of shadow. Cast shadows from all those trees to make this feels a bit more anchored. Actually, I'll make it a little bit warmer just to keep it sort of consistent. Okay, so over here, I'm just going to mix a sort of a darker green here. There we go. Okay, so very simple shapes, mostly just trying to connect all these tree branches, tree trunks, and also brings out the highlight of this tree right here. Okay. Leaving some lights because they're trees, so they don't cast like a solid shadow. They're leaves and stuff. There we go. So yeah, that's pretty much it, and you can definitely see the different quality of edges, right? You can see the transition between the bright yellow to a little bit of orange here. That is our first stage of wet on to wet. Really just wet with like a very thin mixture of colors, and the colors going to blend like that. And then as the wash become drier, you start to use a thicker mixture and with a nylon brush so that you can get some of this more defined, dark, soft shapes, right? And when and paint those secondary middle value here. And when that's done, you want to add some darker values, darkest dark. You use a smaller nylon brush and mix a even thicker mixtures, and then you can start to paint those dark shapes in. And now the mixture is still and now the wash is still kind of damp, so you can continue to work on it, but I think this is quite enough for this exercise. So I hope you enjoy this quick demo and helpful for you to whatever you are going to paint using the wet on to wet technique. I hope that little demo making the process clear for you. Now let's take a look at the process of this painting. I wanted to capture that brief moment of an autumn morning light in a city, so it's not a typical blue sky sunny day scene, but hopefully I was able to capture the warm glow and the color transition of autumn trees. Okay, so without further ado, let's take a look at the process of the painting. Okay, so start off with a line drawing. I use a dull 4B pencil to block out the shape very loosely and very lightly, so you can barely see the pencil line here, but it is visible for me, so I usually base my drawing on that. Do a little bit of perspective here. The drawing is very loose right now with a lot of the line connected. I try not to lift my pencil as much as possible. I don't want to constantly break my train of thought. The way you draw will carry over to the way you paint. So if you consistently lifting your pencil, doing short little lines, it's very likely you will start to dab a lot when you are doing the painting. And that's usually not a good idea when you're painting watercolor. So as I block out the car and the building, I start to tighten things up a little bit, start to draw the structure of the cars and the buildings. Drawing is a boring stage, so a lot of times people tend to try to get over that as fast as possible. That being said, it is a very important stage of the painting. It's like laying down the foundation and the structure of a house. If the foundation and the structure of the house is not sound, the building is going to fall no matter how well you decorate it. So try not to skimp on drawing that much. And over here, I do use ruler a little bit. And I know some artists frown on using ruler, but it is a very nice tool for me, especially when I need to draw some very long lines. This will help me to keep my lines straight and fall into the perspective and so on. So I'm not against using it, just don't over rely on the tools. You can see that I switched to a mechanical pencil. This allowed me to draw a finer drawing, a tighter drawing. However, the pencil lead is still 4B. 4B gets dark enough for me to see the drawing, but it's also soft enough so it's easier for me to erase. So here I start to draw the car with a little bit more details. Finishing up the lamppost and the buildings on the right side. I plan to make them very loose, so I'm not drawing a lot of details. And for the trees, I usually just leave them very loose, and I'm not going to draw any more detail on the trees because I usually just leave it for the brush to do the work. Trees are more of an organic shape, so it doesn't really require a lot of drawings. Okay, now that the drawing is done, I am starting to apply some masking fluid. I start to use a little bit more masking fluid nowadays because there's just something about leaving the white of the paper. It's just looking very clean and it's much brighter than using white gouache afterwards, in my opinions anyways. And since I really want those pretty bright glow from the sun, I am starting to apply some masking fluid to some of the areas. So also in the bright spot in the sky, the top of the car, some really bright trees and so on. And even after we remove the masking fluid, we can still paint on it, and that's what I was planning to do. After apply the masking fluid, I do a quick blow dry, just make sure the masking fluids are dry, and start my wash for the sky. I pre-wet the sky, so I have a little bit more time working on it, and I start to mix the color of the sky. It is not a blue sky, so I start out by mixing sort of a cool gray. Still a little bit of blue here, but very quickly I started to apply some cool grays for the cloudy sky. We do need to leave some bright spot on the right side. And here you can see that the sky is mostly very soft. Leave a few white areas, and before it is completely dry, I add a little bit more darker cloud, wet onto wet. And I also use a paper towel to lift a little bit of the paint here and there, get some light back. You can do that while the wash is still very wet. And here I use a smaller brush, my brown hair brush, to add more value. But as you can see on the left side, the cauliflower edge is starting to form. So the way to tell is that when you see the edge of wet onto wet shape is not as spread out as it could, but the wash itself is not completely dry yet. And that's a sign that it's going to turn into cauliflower edges. So usually at that point, I will force myself to stop. Even if I don't like it that much, it's still better to just leave it alone than continue to work on it till it messed up. So you see me start to paint other part of the painting, getting the initial wash, the color of the light in. And now I start off by painting the bright trees in the back. They still have a little bit of value, but they're mostly pretty light. So I use quite a bit of Hansen Yellow Deep for those warm, bright greens. It's one of my favorite color in my palette, especially when it comes to painting foliages and trees. Green is the color that's kind of tricky to mix because it's very easy to make green look unnatural. So the way I mix greens is usually using cobalt turquoise as a base and add different warms and cools to it to make the green look more natural. And because it is a autumn scene with sunlight, with warm sunlight, I add quite a bit of Hansen Yellow Deep and even a little bit of orange to make the green nice and warm. So as you can see, I'm not crazy about that edge on the top. It's not as soft as I want it to be, but I decided to just leave it alone. And hopefully, when I paint some foreground trees, I will be able to cover some of those up. So up to this point of the painting, I was just trying to cover the paper up with different colors. And that sort of get over the mental hurdle of a perfectly white paper. And that kind of helped me to do the next step, which is middle value wash. So I start from the buildings on the right. And again, I want to keep it loose, so I didn't really draw a lot of details. And at this point, it's really just color mixing with each other. And as you can see, I'm painting a big shape, but I'm adding different color to it. So it have a little bit of transition from cool to warm. The sidewalk is nice and warm, and the building itself is a little bit cooler. And then I connect that to sort of a shadow shape on the road, and that connects to the car. So as you can see, I'm painting one big shape. It's just that I switched the color within it. So the shape itself looks interesting because of the different colors. And also it shows a little bit of depth in some ways, even though the value is very simple right now. But because of the different colors, you can feel like there's light moving inside of that shape. Light is what makes everything interesting and beautiful. I encourage you to observe your surrounding when the sun is out. You can see all sorts of different colors of light, and all the bounce light is just very subtle, different shift in colors, even in the shadow area. And that's what makes the world around us beautiful. And now I'm using a nylon brush to do wet onto wet sort of detail in the buildings on the back. The building is in the distance, so I don't want to make it very sharp looking. So I feel like a little bit of wet onto wet with a nylon brush is perfect. And then I continue to wash down and paint the buildings in the midground. And I thought not to stall for time anymore, so I switched to my brown hairbrush and paint the trees on the left. So start by making a wash for the tree on the left. A little bit of the details around the edges, getting some look and feel of the foliages. And then I start to add a little bit more color. As you can see here, I added some more warm colors, yellow, red. And then I start to switch to my small nylon brush to add some darker details while I'm at it. And you can see these darker details are nice and soft, but they are also starting to become more defined. This is perfect to give volumes to the tree, to add some darks, and also some subtle tree branches and leaves. Trees have a lot of details because all the leaves, but the key to paint a tree is not to get all the details, but to interpret as volume, is lushness. And to do that, using wet onto wet technique is a good way to do it. You can have the soft transition of colors, but also have some soft dark that helps to interpret the volume of the trees. So as you can see, the tree on the left is taking its shape. You start to feel the form changing, the volume, without seeing a single leaf painted out. And as the wash starting to become dry, I painted some branches and I also scratched out some highlights. You can do that if the wash is thick enough and is getting dry. It's not completely dry yet, it's still kind of damp, but you can scratch them out for some textures and effects and so on. So now I continue the wash to the left, getting the building in, and again I try to stay loose on that. I mainly just want to capture the light in this painting, so a lot of the structural details I didn't really pay that much attention to it. And I also want to paint the trees with wet onto wet techniques to interpret the color shifting and the volume, so I didn't really pay that much attention to the houses and stuff. So painting the little figure and also the red trees in the distance, and then I start to paint the cars, keeping them nice and simple. Just put the right value shape in the right place and they will look like cars. And also use my small nylon brush to paint the signal light, the road sign and things like that. A small nylon hairbrush is great for small detail like those. Now I'm adding more dark details to cars on the back. Give them a shadows on the bottom so they feel like they are actually on the road, not floating. Now the bigger car in the front. I want to have a glowing tail light, that's why I put some masking fluid on it and do some wet onto wet. Even though that is not in the photo, I feel like it will add a little bit more life to it. And now I start to paint the tree on the right. So some dry brush strokes around the edges to get the texture of the leaf out. And everything else I pretty much follow the same process, getting a nice wash and then added some dark with a nylon brush. Now the tree on the right is a little bit darker because it's backlit. So I try to be a little bit more heavy-handed when I give that initial wash, just so that I don't have to keep painting and add more dark afterwards. And now you can see that the trees are out, the darks are out. You start to see the full value range of the painting. And the process become a lot easier now because now it's easier for you to judge the value and knowing if you need to make something darker or keep the value the way they are. So the buildings on the right needs to be darker because they are pretty much the same value as the trees on the right, so I make them darker and added some soft details within the shape. And again, keeping it loose, I just treat it as a big shape instead of individual buildings with a lot of architectural details and stuff like that. And honestly speaking, the building itself is actually not that interesting looking anyways, so keeping it loose seems like a good choice. Adding a few dark details to the buildings on the left, and then I start to remove the masking fluid and reveal the bright highlights. Now I cannot leave those just as pure white, that doesn't really make sense. So I do need to go back and start to add more brighter colors, sort of like a glaze. So I paint some very bright colors of red and warm greens So what I did here is I added some colors, scrub it a little bit, and pick it up with paper towel, sometimes that leaves a little bit of glowing soft edges. And here you can also see the masking fluid did wonder for the signal light and the card light. They just look so nice and bright. And with a little bit of glazing, you can maintain that brightness but give in just a little bit of colors. So tools like masking fluid and rulers, I didn't use them when I started to learn watercolor because some artists that I follow didn't use them, and that's completely fine. Each artist have their own ways of working. But after I discovered some ways of using them, I now try to apply them when it's appropriate. So I'm adding a cast shadow to the buildings on the left, casted by the awning. It's also a way to make things look just a little bit more interesting. And at this point, I'm just trying to make the light pops a little bit more, so I add some more dark in the back of those foliages. Those looks like bushes and trees in the pot. Doesn't really matter what they are, the key is to get the light out. So adding just a little bit more detail for the sidewalk, and I'm doing a glazing for the road, making it just a little bit more colorful, and it also gave me an opportunity to leave out some light for the crosswalk. Adding some more dark details on the right. And now it's time to paint some trees, some leaves in the foregrounds. These are very important because I feel like they pushes a lot of the depth. When you're painting individual leaves like that, it means they are very close to you. I use my nylon hairbrush for that. It's easier to paint individual shapes with this brush. And now with this foreground leaves in, the painting looks a lot more complete. And the cloud edge on the top that I didn't really like, now because all the darks that are introduced in this painting, that cloud is now pushed back a lot. So sometime when you don't like part of the painting, it's a good idea to persist and continue your painting. You never know how it's going to turn out. So don't give up until you absolutely tried everything you can. Sometimes it's really not as bad as you think. You can continue the painting. So here I'm adding some more dark. As I add more dark and contrast, the light become lighter. And now you can really feel that morning sun glow in the painting. Here is the finished painting. I did a few more touches after the recording is over, but I hope you like this demo and I hope it is helpful for you. Alright, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed that, and more importantly, I hope it helps your painting. Again, my brush set is still available if you are interested. Link is down below. You can grab one while supplies last. I am Eric from Cafe Watercolor. I hope you enjoyed a beautiful autumn. Stay warm, take care, and I will see you again soon. God bless.